the next episode on Researcher Revealed. The number's going to be up here because I can't remember which one I'm on now, and I forgot to check before I started recording. On this episode, I'm very excited because our guest today, who's agreed to come and share her experience around research, is Lynn. And Lynn works with me and sits on the Chief Nursing Office Shared Decision Making Research Council. And I've gotten to hear a little bit about her story. And so I asked her to come and be a guest on the podcast because I wanted to find out more about several bits of her research journey, because I think it'll be a really powerful conversation. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Researcher Revealed. I'm Dr. Rosalind Austin, and on today's episode of Researcher Revealed, we have the very lovely Lynn joining us from Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust, where she works as a consultant nurse, and she also does her PhD. Lynn, tell us who you are and all of your various roles that you have.
Thank you, Rosalind. I'm a consultant nurse working in our community hospitals, predominantly with older people. And I've been working in the community hospitals since 2008, which is quite a wee while. But I've never been bored. It's brilliant. The patients that you meet you learn something new every day with them. So I've been a ward sister on two wards, two separate wards, and then I moved on to doing my advanced practice course. And I've worked as an advanced nurse practitioner since 2015. That's when I qualified. And I've just moved into a consultant nurse role, which is hugely exciting and loads of potential for further development, but also developing staff and taking staff with me on that journey to, help them progress and actually enhance patient care. I'm also doing a PhD at De Montfort University, also in Leicester. De Montfort University.
De Montfort, okay. Thank you.
And so yes, I started that in October 2021. I do it part-time, and I get 1 day a week to do that. And it's very challenging, but also liberating at the same time, if that makes sense. And so yeah, and my previous background was actually on trauma orthopedics at Leicester hospitals. Where I'd worked my way up from being newly qualified staff nurse up to being a ward sister and education and practice development sister, with a focus on audit and research. So
hold that thought, because before I ask you to tell and share with us today how you got into research, before we go down that, because otherwise we'll get distracted and I'll forget to do them. At the beginning of every episode, for all of the regular listeners, we always do what I call the Rapid 11. So are you ready for your Rapid 11?
I'm curious now.
Right. So first one, are you a Windows or a Mac user?
Mac. Well, both actually.
Okay. Explain.
So work Windows and home Mac, but I use both interchangeably.
Skills. I'm clueless when it comes to Mac. Right, next one. Are you tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. When you're writing, do you have sounds in the background like music or nature sounds, or is it complete silence?
I used to listen to this is random.
Okay.
I listen to the radio all the time, like if I'm doing stuff, and tend to listen to sort of rock type, pop type music. But then when I was writing, I used to listen to classical music. And now I don't have anything on.
Okay, so it's an evolution.
I do it in silence because I get too distracted.
Fair enough. What time of day are you most productive?
In the afternoons, from about 2 o'clock onwards,
Okay.
I'm really, really productive when it comes to writing, and I can write till 10, 11 o'clock at night when
And
I'm actually writing.
where do you tend to work? At home or at the office?
So for work, I work at work, and I don't have an office, so it'll be on a ward.
Okay.
But at home, I have a nice wee study with
Oh,
like
lovely. And
a,
that's for
a
PhD.
desk. So yeah, that's PhD. And if I
Okay.
do any work from home that is work related.
Okay. What is your favorite referencing management system?
That's a very good question. So I like Zotero for how it
Okay.
you store all the PDFs and you can write notes down the side.
Yeah.
But when I am writing, whenever I write something, I then put it all in RefWorks, because then I segregate all my chapters and themes into the folders, so that when I'm writing separate chapters, or even when I'm doing work for work, I will have a separate folder for it. So all those references that I have written, then I can cut and paste the reference list of bibliography.
Nice. That sounds well cool. I think you're the first person who's mentioned RefWorks, so that's a new one.
It's very simple for my tiny little mind, but it's good. It's good.
Sounds good. I like simple. What about your favorite tool to create images, graphs, flowcharts, stuff like that? Your data visualization.
So that is a very good question, because I don't know, and I would really like to know how to do that. So I can do it on Excel, and I can do stuff on PowerPoint, but I haven't yet learned to make things look individualized, like so that you can't tell that it's been done on PowerPoint, you can't tell it's been done on Excel. And I would like to learn how to actually create those images so that when you are presenting data, it looks interesting, because just showing a load of bar charts or pie charts can be tedious.
Yeah.
Speaking from
Yeah.
experience, and if
Yeah.
I think it's that, then other people will too. So
Yeah.
yeah, any top tips, gratefully received.
That's why I asked these questions. Next one is, when you're sitting at your desk writing away, do you have a favorite snack?
No.
You don't snack while you write?
Occasionally I do, but actually, if I'm really concentrating, I have to get done what I need to get done. And so if I stop, I then lose my track. And so
Okay.
I try not to sit and snack. If I'm snacking, it means I'm procrastinating.
Maybe that's my problem. Ah, right. Next one is, when you're planning or organizing, so like a research project or what you're doing or things like that, or like your life, are you a digital person or are you a pen and paper person?
It depends on what I'm doing. I've discovered that I am a little bit more creative with flip charts,
Okay.
and actually I've got multicolored pens and everything. It's hugely exciting.
So pen and
Um,
paper.
so yeah, pen and paper, but yeah, I can write ideas and thing, and have arrows going off,
Yeah.
and then on my wall here, which you obviously can't see, I've got post-it notes with ideas stuck on here as well,
Yeah.
because then it's easy to visualize, but then I can take a photograph of it and save it into my into like all my PhD folders of what I'm doing. So then I can share it with my supervisors.
Nice. That's well clever. Second last question. What book are you currently reading?
What sort of book?
Just a book that you're currently reading. You can either confess 1 or 3 or whatever book like you're reading.
The book that I'm currently plowing my way through is
it looks huge.
It is. It's the Sage Handbook of Qualitative Research.
What I'll ask you to do is, can you email me the full title and which version it is, and I'll put it in the episode description so that other people who might be interested in the same kind of research can find it and look it up.
It's the 5th edition.
5th edition. Send me an email.
I'll send you an email. Yeah, so there's that, and I'm really not good at reading books, like novels.
Okay.
I tend to read biographies and facts, and I sit and I play games on my iPad to switch off. But the stuff that I do read, it tends to be from newspapers and articles.
Nice. I like it. Last question is, who is a researcher you admire?
Oh, that's difficult. There's so many that I admire. Who do I really admire? Obviously yourself. Who's an absolute inspiration? See, I tweet about people that inspire me, who are researchers, and there's so many.
So what I'll do then is, if you're happy, is again in the description of the episode, I'll share your Twitter handle so that people can look through your feed and then they can see the people who are inspiring you, rather than you trying to pick one name.
So Calvin Morley.
Yeah.
He's inspirational. Joe Cooper.
Yeah.
Inspirational. Yourself, Tuti. All of the nurses that are involved in the Chief Nursing Officer Shared Professional Decision Making Council for Research, because they are the people who have encouraged me and actually allowed me to have a voice and supported me, and they are just absolutely wonderful. And all of them are just so inspiring. So yeah, and they're all nurses.
You've stolen my words now. I feel like really
so sorry.
To be like grouped in with the people that are in there. Like, it's still like, I still like, when I go to those meetings that we both attend, I have moments where I look around the virtual room and my brain just goes, how did I get here? Speaking of which, how did you not get to that room, but how did you get drawn into research?
This is a very, very long story.
Try and shorten it, because we want to keep it to about an hour so that people don't wander off.
So I was a staff nurse working in trauma orthopedics, and I would use certain dressings on certain wounds, and people would say, oh, why are you doing that? And I'd say, oh, because it does this, this, and this. And then somebody challenged me and said, you're very good at quoting research, but do you actually understand it? And I was like, oh, maybe I don't. And so I started, I had done, I'd got involved in our director of nursing at the time, set up what was the RED Council, and it was the Research Education Development Council. And I was interested in research. And so we did a conference But part of that was about actually presenting some work. So I'd done some work on the trauma unit. We'd got 120 beds, and I looked at the prevalence of pressure sores on the unit and presented that data and information to the conference, and the regional chief nursing officer was there, and she was really interested. And she said, "Oh, you could have one of these handheld computers at the end of the bed." I mean, this was in like 1998, which was like pie in the sky back then, but now it does actually happen. And so I shared that, and then a bit later on, there was we'd had some problems with people having quite large pressure sores, and so I had my existing evidence along with some more photographic evidence, and took it to the unit manager, saying, "Actually, do you know what? We need to do something about this, and so we need to make tissue viability mandatory training." So I did the teaching for tissue viability, how wounds develop, how you can get them healed, and types of dressings, etc. So that's what I did. And then, still off the back of what the ward sister had said about me not knowing about research, I enrolled on the ENB 870 course, which is developments in research, or introduction to research. So this is, I'm fairly ancient, but still 22. And so I did this course in research, and the Sylvia Ham Ying was the lead lecturer, and she was truly inspirational. And she said, when you're dealing with research, what you need to think is, do you want to be collecting somebody else's data, or do you want to be leading your own research? And that was the thing that got me. I was like, actually, do I want to lead it, or do I just want to collect somebody else's data? I thought, I don't actually want to collect somebody else's data, because then I might not have like ownership of it and not be properly involved. So so I completed that. I got my diploma, because I did the traditional training whereby, you know, it was a certificate at the end, and then so I got my diploma through that, and then I went straight on to do my master's, because I was interested. My interest had been piqued, and it was about, actually, how do I progress this? And I'd wanted to do a degree, because that would be the next stepping stone. And our education lead for the directorate said, "Forget that, just go on and do a master's degree." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I did. That massive stepping stone from doing a diploma to doing a master's. And I decided to do a master's in nursing, because that's what I am. I am a nurse.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what else to do.
Okay.
And so that's how I did my master's in nursing. And again, the research module in that was brilliant. We had an absolute fantastic senior lecturer in research, who was active in research. Leicester's got a very diverse population, and he'd done a lot of research into thalassemia, which is predominant in some South Asian communities. And so actually learning how he had, and obviously other researchers had got access to these different groups who are quite often a bit wary of, you know, health researchers and things like that, and actually about helping that population was really, really interesting. And then there was another article that as part of that by Roth, I can't give you the date or the publication, because it's lost in the depths of time somewhere, but like not in the depths of time, but somewhere in this house somewhere, I still have the article. But anyway, the author was Roth, and it was about the researcher and the researched, and how the researcher has a place in the being part of that whole research process. So this was really interesting, and so I wrote a reflection on that and how that had implications for research, but also clinical practice. And it was I got a really good grade, and I was really happy. So various life events happened. Eventually, I did get my master's in nursing 2007. And then things went a bit quiet. I changed jobs, I changed organisations, and I did a few different things, but I was still really interested in research. And when you say to some managers, I'd really like to do some research. Oh no, well, you don't want to do that. No, it's not. You can't do it in that job role as a ward sister. And I'm really quite stubborn. So you find your ways around things. So another manager had said to me years ago, when things don't go your way or you find yourself up against a brick wall, walls end somewhere. You just have to find your way around them.
Oh, that is beautiful.
So sometimes I've been up against quite long walls, and eventually I find the way around them. But yeah, you just have to find a different way of doing things. I'm not very creative, but I get there eventually.
So I'm going to pause you for a second. Why do you think, because something you said just piqued my interest, why do you think in general, because you're not the first person who said that their managers are like, oh, nurses don't do that. Why do you think in general there is a bit of a culture in nursing that research isn't for nurses to own?
I think there's a lack of understanding. I think it's better now. I think the training's better, and I think there's still some way to go. I think the training's better. In nursing, it's not in our culture. It is in other disciplines. Like, well, right from when your first day at university or nursing school, whatever, it wasn't there. And it also depends on the people who you've got around you. And so if you have managers or leaders who don't understand research, it's something that's frightening, and not frightening as in terrifying, but actually, oh God, my goodness, I wouldn't even know where to start. I don't know how to interpret it. I think they're the things that people are frightened of. The other thing is that it's not seen as income generating, and yes, it is. So when you are skilled and knowledgeable in research, there is the potential to then lead research within your organisation and bring that money in. And I don't think that there is a perception from some managers. I'm not generalising at all. There are some managers that don't see that because they can't see it immediately.
Yeah.
And quite often in the NHS, it's quite results driven. And so therefore we are doing this, we need to see the results to, continue.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
Okay, so back to your story. Just press pause for a second. You came across this wall where your line managers were like, research, not for you, not for this job. You're finding your way along the end of it. So fast forward a bit, how did you get past that wall?
So it was, somebody said, I had wanted to finish my advanced practice course. So I'd moved on from being a ward sister, trainee advanced nurse practitioner, again at master's level. And initially I'd been told that I didn't need to complete my second master's because I had already got a master's, so I didn't have to do the dissertation. So I've actually got a postgraduate diploma in advanced practice. I don't have a full master's in it because I was
told. You had the master's in nursing.
But when I was advised, when I said, oh, actually, I'd like to finish my master's, I was told that it wasn't appropriate to do that, and other people that were doing it had their careers ahead of them.
No.
Yeah. So then we had a talk from our head of research, along with a colleague who's now our lead nurse for research, when she had finished her bronze award. I can't remember the title of it. It's not a PCAF, but it's a stepping stone towards starting a PhD.
Okay, so yeah, before PCAFs, there was all sorts of things.
I think it wasn't the bronze. I think she'd done the silver, actually, to be fair. So she'd been successful with that. So they were talking about research, and then I emailed the head of research saying, I'm really, really interested in this. And so we met and had a chat about it. And then we had somebody new in the research team that was actually assigned to our directorate. And she has been absolutely outstanding. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I am. In fact, if it wasn't for the research team in LPT, I wouldn't be where I am, because they've helped me navigate the whole process of getting towards a PhD. I just wanted to be involved in research. Yeah. And then it was like, well, have you thought about this? And I'd actually applied for a PCAF award. And I'd got enough points to be fundable. Yeah. But I wasn't funded because I didn't come high enough up the rankings. And so that was really disappointing. I even cried about it, because I was so disappointed, because you put so much hard work and effort into it, and in your own time as well, to attempt to get there. And then the same happened a second time, and then it was like, actually, what one of the professors at the university said, who was involved in partnership with LPT and the research team, said, why don't you just apply and do a PhD? And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can. Anyway, with the help of this professor and LPT research team, I managed to produce a research proposal that was suitable to apply. So I did. So I was accepted by the university, and then there was the trouble of funding. And so I managed to be successful in getting East Midlands ARC, NHR ARC funded PhD, match-funded PhD, which is part funded by ARC, but also a contribution is made by LPT, and the and De Montfort University have also chipped in. So I'm hugely grateful.
That's incredible. So what a journey you've been on, and like so many accomplishments along the way, like to have, basically, aside from a extra dissertation, two masters. All the other accomplishments that you did in changing your job roles and your banks, your levels and things like that, to now be, how far into your PhD are you?
I'm in my third year part-time.
Okay, so getting
months.
Close then.
Well, no, it needs to be a bit more towards the beginning. I think everybody says that with their PhD, though. I think.
What do you mean?
Yeah. So, because there's never enough time, and it's better to be closer to the beginning.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you'll also go through stages where the closer you get to the end, you go through stages where you look at what you did and you're like, what on God's green earth was I thinking? Because you just like, I saw a meme the other day on social media and it was like, it made me laugh so loud because it said like, doing a PhD is the equivalent of a group project that's gone on for years. But the only problem is right before you hand it in, you find out that the group who helped you do your project made a lot of mistakes. But the real kicker is that you're the group.
Yeah, that's it. Because you literally do everything yourself.
Yeah.
I look back at stuff that I've done and I think, oh my goodness, that was so bad.
Oh, I will be forever grateful
Just
for one of my
no, carry on.
supervisors, and he like drilled it into my head. Because like I think a lot of us, especially like clinicians who get into research, I think we are more predisposed to be perfectionist. And I think our clinical training reinforces that perfectionist mindset because clinically, if you make mistakes, people get hurt. And my main supervisor drilled into my head that in research, it's a different game. And you're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming for the best version of least wrong.
You saw me thinking then,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah. And I let you think because it takes a bit to hear it. The best version of least wrong. Which basically infers, and it was a belief that he held and I've adopted, that with research, we are effectively creating new knowledge. And in order to create that new knowledge, in order to create that evidence base, we are compiling evidence that we believe we have observed using those tools with their inherent limitations, with the limitations of who said yes and blah, 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 blah. And we are presenting that as a little nugget of closer to the truth. I won't even say the truth, but closer to the truth. And actually, the only way that our knowledge base is going to improve is if over the years, people keep altering and shifting that and adding to it. So it's never perfect. It's your best version of least wrong.
Yes, that makes sense actually, because when you're like, so my research is actually about people's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to replicate, when I eventually get to talk to patients, if I do a group of, individual patient interviews, say next month, 2 years down the line, you use the same protocol that I've used, you're going to get different answers because times change and people's perceptions change and their life experience is all individual. And so that all shapes that qualitative research. And so, you're absolutely right. I like that.
I know. I love it. It's one of the many things that I like hold close to my heart now. Makes me feel much better. So 3 years into your PhD, not yet started data collection or started data collection?
No, I haven't started data collection because I need to, I'm in the process of going through my methodology. And once I have done that, and my methods, is the trouble is it's all in my head and getting it on paper is really difficult. Until I get those little aha moments, it's like, oh, that makes sense, and then it goes on my flip chart, and then I handwrite stuff. So and then when I've handwritten it, it then goes into like a proper document that's referenced, etc. And I'm just going to turn my sweepers off because the bin man's just arrived. And the dogs are going nuts. So give me 2 ticks.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, can you not? Oh, great.
No. No,
Oh, the
I'm not
dogs
hearing.
dogs are barking. There's
I
a
cannot
bin.
hear the dogs. Oh, they're a little bit. It's fine. It's fine. It's part of life. It's the reality. We're not in a fancy studio. We're both in our home offices.
I know, with trees outside.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right. So where
So,
was I? Um.
uh, well, what you were doing is you were
Oh, my
describing your
methodology.
process of writing, but I'm going to interrupt you because I think to help give people a bit of context about what's happening in your life now in terms of research and writing and PhD, it might just help a little bit. Like, what is your PhD on? What are you researching? Just give a quick, your
Yeah.
3-minute thesis on
Oh,
what you're up to.
yes. So my research is on older people, and whether they experience an acute admission to hospital, like an admission to hospital with an acute medical illness.
Okay.
So being admitted through the emergency department, coming out the other end, into the community hospitals, whether they perceive that admission or the illness as a stressful experience, and what is their experience of that admission.
That sounds fascinating. That sounds really, really interesting and something that so it wasn't the focus of my PhD, but it was something that I saw in interviews. So in general, I would say, and the title of your PhD kind of is an example of that, as clinicians, we view, in general, going to the hospital as a stressful event or a bad event or a negative event. Because in our heads, or at least in my head anyway, and a lot of the people I've spoken to, we believe that by coming to the hospital, it's a reminder of I'm not well, things are going wrong, I don't feel well, I'm maybe in the midst of an existential crisis, so on and so forth. And we put a negative connotation on that hospital visit. And I'm often curious as to whether or not patients feel the same. So I will be fascinated to see what comes out of your research because it's slightly different because yours is in the emergency situation. So potentially there is a lot more trauma and stress around that sort of event. But in my own practice, where I saw quite a lot more outpatients, so not emergency patients, I was always rushing, not because my clinic list was necessarily crazy long, although that's a factor as well. I would rush because I thought these people don't want to be in the hospital because the hospital is bad, negative, stressful, blah, 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 blah. And I had so many patients who like you couldn't get rid of them for love nor money because they were like, this is the day out.
I think it's interesting how there's different
In that same
perceptions with different
population, the
people.
older frail.
Yes, so some people, it doesn't bother them, but also I think as healthcare professionals, we see this as routine and norm, and so, well, this is normal. And actually, like you've said, being admitted to hospital is really abnormal because there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And so then it there's two sides to it, with obviously a variety of perspectives. But it was some patients that I had looked after going, oh my goodness, don't ever send me back there, it was awful. And this isn't just one hospital, this is like a range of like acute
Okay.
hospitals,
And that was
whereby
specifically, don't send me back to the emergency department.
no, the acute hospital, like
Okay.
so the admission, you go through the emergency department, that's the route of admission, so it's not a
Yeah.
planned admission. And people would, so some patients have said that they've that, and this is obviously anecdotal because I haven't interviewed any, this is me working in clinical practice, and they've said things like, oh my goodness, it was awful. And you say, why was it so awful? Things like not getting enough sleep because the ward's noisy, because, people are unwell, they, are being looked after. So patients who are confused, again, making the ward noisy. And the patients that are confused are obviously unwell. They've likely got delirium due to an infection or something like that. Or even something as simple as not having their hearing aids in, which isn't simple because it's a fairly major form of communication. And things like that. And you think, oh, I'd never considered that. And these are the things that some people, so I think that I'm hoping that I get rich data from, when I do get to do my interviews with patients.
So for you then, your PhD work proposal was born out of clinical conversations that you had with patients that made you go, I wonder.
But also my background in trauma orthopedics. So I spent 15 years in trauma orthopedics. I was seeing similar sort of stress type responses in older people who hadn't been in ITU, hadn't, been in major road traffic collisions, etc., with young people having these really similar, some of the symptoms. And it's like, oh, what's going on? And it's just because I'm quite a reflective practitioner in that I look at things and I'm always curious. I'm permanently curious about things. Well, why is this happening? What's causing it? And what can I do about it as a nurse or as an advanced nurse practitioner? And so that's how it all came about.
I keep hearing snippets of what you're up to through the shared decision-making council that we both sit on. And I cannot wait for you to get your research data collected and for it to come out, because I think you're asking really relevant and important questions. And I think it'll be really fascinating to find out what you discover. Now, I'm very conscious of the time, but there's a question that I've been dying to ask you for ages. So may I ask you my question?
I'm curious now.
So this was highlighted. So like me, you were nominated / chosen for the 70, not 77, but the 75 years of NHS, 75 Faces of Nursing Research. And in that profile that you put up, which I'll put a link in the description as well for all of you listeners, so that you can go on to NHS Futures and scroll through them, because there's lots of inspiring people there. But it was something I'm not sure whether it was actually on your profile or was around the discussions, but you said something, and as a research nurse who's practiced for ages, it picked my ears up fiercely. And I want to know the story behind how you became one of the possibly first, if not only, I've ever heard of nurses who were a PI on a CTIMP research study.
There is a good story with this, actually.
Yes.
So,
and I really want to hear it, because I think it goes back to like, it's a nice way to bookend our conversation, because it goes back to like what we were talking about around how you got into research and those walls and barriers that you came across, and how one of the things that I think a lot of people misunderstand about nurses' role in research is actually how research, even if it's not a CTIMP, might actually prove to be an income generating activity for a given department or trust. Now, whether that's because, like you, if you hadn't gotten your PhD, if you hadn't gotten it funded, the trust would have to be paying your full-time salary. Now, yes, they're only getting, in theory, a shorter period of your hours, but your salary is still being paid, and they don't have to pay that. And they're going to benefit from the reputation you're building around you, the research you're building around you, the publications that will likely come out of it, and all of the activities that you're doing. And so it's a real way, it's a real underrated way that nurses can really build the reputation and the income and all of those other things around a given hospital, as well as improving care, yada, yada, yada. I could go on for this for ages. But back to my question, how did you do it? What sort of black magic?
Well, it wasn't quite black magic. It was so I had, strangely enough, been whittling on about wanting to be involved in research for a long time. So I'd obviously reached out to our research department, so they knew about me. I'd also spoken to my boss at the time, saying, I really want to do stuff with research. Can I do this course, etc. And usually the answer was no. But my interest had been fed up the chain of command, and just before Christmas, in 2019, when things were still quite normal, I had a phone call from our head of nursing, saying, "Hi, Lynn, how do you fancy being a PI for a research trial?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." No idea what a PI was, because I'm not very good with acronyms.
Okay, so and pause. Tell everybody what a PI is.
So it's a principal investigator,
okay,
which is the person that is responsible for oversight of the trial on a particular site, and the chief investigator. So this was for a multi-site trial. So in London and Bradford and in Leicestershire. And so I was that responsible person in Leicestershire, and it was it was a pharmaceutical company looking at using a biogel for and using autologous, so taking the patient's own blood, using that blood, centrifuging it, and using that to actually create a wound dressing for diabetic foot ulcers.
Whoa, and because whoa. So they were spinning patients' blood and turning that into a dressing.
Yeah, a wound healing product. Cool. All at the bedside. So basically, bringing the lab to the bedside. And it was, or what would they say, bench to bedside is the term that they use.
Yeah.
So, and because it was a multidisciplinary team effort, so this team that I worked with was our podiatry team, who are absolutely outstanding, fantastic people. I hate feet, but they're just wonderful. And because of my role in my day-to-day job, being an advanced nurse practitioner, meant that I was able to screen the patients, assess them clinically, and consent them and recruit them onto the trial.
Yeah.
And this was because I had that clinical knowledge and skills, but this was a wound dressing. So this was in my sphere of competence, if you like.
Yeah.
If somebody was going to be trialing antihypertensive medication, I wouldn't be that right person to be the principal investigator. But that's my clinical experience.
Yeah.
So I obviously said yes, but then I'd also signed up to do the research envoy scheme within our organisation, which was basically a bit of a training program and a project to do about how to spread the word of research.
Okay.
And so within that, there was the good clinical practice course.
Yeah.
and then so that was like obviously your stepping stone to being involved in clinical practice that we all have to keep ourselves up to date with. But then aside from that, because I was going to be a principal investigator, I had to do the NIHR principal investigators training. I also had to do the NIHR consent training as well, so that we were all ticking the regulation boxes for being part of clinical research. We all had to sign lots of documents. We had to do the training for the use of the case report software documentation. And it was, so that's how it came about, steep learning curve. But because I'd already been a ward sister and an advanced nurse practitioner, actually leading a team and making sure that things were done right were second nature to me. And so I used those professional and clinical skills that I already had whilst working with a team. And then the other thing with being a PI for CTIM was that I discovered that people got very, very enthusiastic about this. Oh, it's a nurse. And I'm like, yeah, is this not a thing? And I think things are changing. Which is great. And I know that they're looking at advanced clinical practitioners being involved in CTIM trials and being PIs for that.
They now have, so the NIHR have piloted and they're running a, I think they call it an associate PI program now, to do exactly that, to help support and train both junior medics as well as ACPs, advanced physios, consultant nurses, consultant radiologists, fill in the blank, non-medic senior clinical professionals, and whatever guise their title takes, in order to, like you said, and I thought you explained it beautifully, under their scope of competence and capabilities, match them with a mentor as well as a potential research study where they can kind of have that steep learning curve, but have supervision and support with it as well. So yeah, I think you're right in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things that are changing at the minute.
I think the other key thing is that it's really important to respect other professions and their knowledge, and to not to be taking things away from them, which I know is a really hot topic, and I'm very conscious of it. And I think that our backgrounds and our knowledge, and not ours but everybody's, needs to be respected. Because some places aren't nice places at the moment.
I agree, and I think that mutual respect and honor is crucial, not just to research but to clinical ways of working as well. And like I've experienced on both sides of the fence how when you have a leader who does respect those differences, those differing areas of expertise, beautiful things can grow. And it's not about necessarily taking things away from various people. I think it goes back to like the very foundations of how we started this podcast. What is research? And I think the same thing applies to this, who's supposed to do what job, is do you identify with that task because of tradition? Or do you identify with that task because actually you are the person with the authority, the capability, and the effectiveness to do that in an efficient manner so that the patient has the best outcome? And I don't know that in every case we know the answer to that question yet.
Yes, and that's the great thing about what research is.
Yeah,
Research is being permanently curious and asking the
exactly.
why. And I think
Yeah,
it's taken me so long to get where I am, because I haven't. I've found answer to some of my I found answers to some of my questions along the line, and then I ended up with a question that I couldn't answer because I couldn't find any evidence. And I was like,
yeah,
oh, where do I go with this? And this is when I came up with my research idea for my PhD. And
yeah.
so I had been, so this was back in, I think, 2017. I was like, oh, what's this? In fact, it was 2017. I thought, oh, what's this? And so it's been a really, really long journey, even to
Mm,
get to start a PhD.
yeah,
Um, but it's that permanent questioning. And the other thing about research is actually having the right people around you, because actually doing a PhD, actually learning what you need to know in order to lead research, and to be part of research is phenomenal. And if you don't have the right people around you to guide you on that journey, you aren't going to get there. And
yeah.
so I've got where I am because of lots of other people who I've openly credited when I've done presentations and things, and they know who they are, um, because without them, I would not be anywhere near this. I'd still be up against the wall and only seeing bricks and wee bits of mortar. Um,
I
so
think, oh, sorry.
no. So yeah, it's just having. I think the key thing is just having the right people around you, and when people say that, oh, I'll help you, I'm one of these people that actually go and say, you said you were going to help me, because I say that to people, and then very few people come back. And so when people say, oh yeah, get in contact with me, here's my email address or whatever, I'm there. Hi, I'm interested in blah blah blah. Because when people say that, I believe that's what they're going to do, and most people do.
Yeah.
um so
I think, unless you have any last parting words of wisdom, I can't think of a better way to wrap up this episode. Our hour has flown by, and there's loads of other things that I wanted to talk to you about. But so we'll have to maybe schedule you in a year's time for an update on the PhD, and we can talk about some more stuff that you're looking into and whatnot. Any last words of wisdom for everybody out there listening in the internet world?
there are lots of people out there that will put obstacles in your way, and there's more people that will help you.
Beautiful, Lynn. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me on the podcast Researcher Revealed. I'm sure everybody out there will thoroughly enjoy hearing your story and how you got into research, because I found it very fascinating myself. For everybody listening, as per usual, there will be links in the episode description, both on your podcasting platform of choice if you're listening to it, or on YouTube if you're watching it. And there we'll list how you can find Lynn on social media, maybe some of the work that she's done that's out there that you can see and read, and a couple other links about like the book that she's reading and things like that. So if you have any questions or there's anything that came out of this podcast that you'd like further clarification on, make sure you leave a comment on YouTube, because it's the easiest way for me to find them. They don't get lost somewhere on social media. Just let us know. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Lynn, for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you, Rosalind.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Don't go away. Up next, we have the top 3 takeaways from this week's podcast by Dr. Rosalind Austin.
My hunch was right. Lynn's story, what an incredible journey that she's had, and so much positivity and brilliant energy around research, despite the to use her words, non-linear pathway that she's taken to get to where she is 3 years into her PhD. So my top 3 takeaways from today's episode. My first takeaway from Lynn's conversation was that comment that her senior clinician told to her after she'd been quoting lots of research studies, and they asked her whether or not she actually understood what research was. And I love that as a takeaway because it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. Now, for her, it made her think. And she was like, well, maybe I don't understand. I keep quoting all of these findings from studies and stuff, but how do I know if they're any good? So she enrolled in a course, she got inspired by that lecturer, and that lecturer then propelled her into her journey to get to where she is now, 3 years into her PhD, by asking her another question of, do you want to collect data for other people's research, or do you want to ask your own research questions? And so I think we can often underestimate the power of questions. And I think I would challenge all of you out there who are listening, no matter where you are in your research journey, from research curious to research established, is how well do you really understand what research is? And how are you working towards either collecting research data or creating your own research projects? The second one, takeaway for me, was she kind of hinted at it through her nonlinear research journey, how periodically there would be bumps in her journey or walls. And in general, within nursing, and I've experienced this, and she talked about it in the podcast, is research and a nurse becoming a researcher is not necessarily that popular, that established. And it can often mean that more senior nurses in your department, in your ward, in your hospital, in your institution, when you say to them, I want to do research, they may put up a wall in front of you. And I challenged her around that. And she believes that possibly that might be because of a history of research being missing from nursing culture. And it's one of the things that we work together on with the Chief Nursing Office in trying to help take actions and set up policies nationally in the UK to start to embed research into nursing careers from education all the way to senior levels. And I think at the minute, while things are improving, there's still a bit within existing nurses where research and nurses being researchers can be a little bit frightening for people. It can be a bit understood, and the power of it to change nursing care, to improve services, to change the results, to even possibly generate some income for the trust isn't well understood. And I think, again, one of the reasons why she advocates so much for it, and one of the reasons why I've started this podcast. So, second takeaway is another question and saying, is research actually missing from the culture of nursing? And how can we work to change that? Finally, my third takeaway is in talking about the bumps and walls and challenges that not just nurses, but everybody encounters in research. I loved how she said that somebody told her something to the effect of, when you come up against a wall, and I mean, if you know me, you know I'm always talking about banging my head on a brick wall. She has even better advice in that a wall has a beginning and an end. So instead of standing in one place and repetitively trying to hit that same wall, she's like, turn slightly, walk to the end of the wall and see if you can find a way around. Something I'm going to have to try and start doing more in my life and my career. I think it's brilliant advice. And I think for her, teaching her how to do that were champions who came alongside of her, real advocates who helped her navigate ways around those walls, those barriers, those challenges, so that she is now sitting in a position as a consultant nurse in the hospital, who's also completing her PhD funded part-time, looking at better understanding the experience of older adults who are hospitalized, so that hopefully it will start to better inform our clinical practice to make that emergent, potentially stressful event less stressful for them. So I think those are really powerful things to really take away, and I think I need to think about them a little bit more. But the standouts for me from this conversation were, do you actually understand what research is? Is research missing from nursing culture? And who are your champions who are helping you navigate the walls that you encounter along your way? Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And thanks again to Lynn for joining me on the podcast. Found it very, very fascinating. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to, if you're listener only, don't forget to rate us on your podcasting platform of choice, leave a review, tell others about the podcast if you thought you enjoyed it. If you are on YouTube watching it, then give it a like, subscribe to the channel just to help grow it a little bit so that more people can access it. I think after we stopped the recording button, one of the things that Lynn was chatting to me is she was saying one of the reasons why that she did say yes to coming on it is because she wants other people out there to know that a journey into research isn't linear. There are challenges in it, but it is completely possible, and that it's the best thing ever. So help us share and help us to demystify research by telling people about the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you again in 3 weeks. Take care. Bye.